Imagine a story so incredible it sounds like pure fantasy. A story of a ragtag army thousands of miles from home with no supplies, no leader, and facing impossible odds. Yet they achieved one of the most stunning victories in all of history. This isn't a fantasy. It's the real story of the First Crusade and the capture of Jerusalem in 1099. How did they pull it off? Stick around, because this tale of faith, desperation, and sheer willpower will blow your mind. Our story begins in the year 1095, a time when faith was the bedrock of society. The world was a very different place. For centuries, the Holy Land, the very ground where Jesus was said to have walked, had been under Muslim rule. Pilgrimages were still possible, but they were becoming more difficult and dangerous. In the east, the Byzantine Empire, the last bastion of the old Roman Empire, was under immense pressure from the Seljuk Turks. The Byzantine Emperor Alexios I Komnenos sent a desperate plea for help to the most powerful man in Western Europe, Pope Urban II. At the Council of Clermont in France, Pope Urban II delivered a speech that would ignite a continent. He spoke of the struggles of Eastern Christians and the sanctity of Jerusalem. He called upon the knights and nobles of Europe to stop fighting amongst themselves and to turn their swords towards a common holy purpose, to reclaim the Holy Land for Christendom. But he offered something more, something utterly irresistible in that deeply religious age: the complete forgiveness of all sins for anyone who took up the cross and joined the expedition. This was a spiritual get-out-of-jail-free card. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Cries of "Deus vult!" God wills it! Erupted from the crowd. This wasn't just a call to war. It was a call to salvation. And so the call went out across Europe. It reached powerful dukes and counts, seasoned knights clad in iron, and humble peasants who had never ventured more than a few miles from their village. Their motivations were a complex mix. Some, the nobles, saw a chance for land, wealth, and glory. Younger sons who wouldn't inherit their family estates saw an opportunity to carve out their own kingdoms in the East. Others were driven by a thirst for adventure, a chance to see the world beyond their feudal horizons. But for the vast majority, the driving force was pure, unadulterated faith. They truly believed they were embarking on a sacred mission, an armed pilgrimage ordained by God Himself. They stitched red crosses onto their clothes, a symbol of their vow, and prepared to march into the unknown. The First Crusade had begun. What followed was one of the most chaotic and massive movements of people the medieval world had ever seen. Tens of thousands, perhaps as many as 100,000 people, began the long, treacherous journey east. This wasn't a single organized army. It was a collection of different forces, each led by its own lord, all converging on the Byzantine capital, Constantinople. The journey itself was an ordeal of epic proportions. They marched through unfamiliar lands, facing scorching heat and freezing cold. Food was scarce, and starvation was a constant companion. Disease, like dysentery, ripped through their camps, claiming lives by the thousands. They were ambushed by hostile local forces and picked off one by one. Many, especially in the disorganized People's Crusade that went ahead of the main armies, perished before they even reached Asia. It was a brutal filter. Those who died were simply left behind. But for those who survived, every step, every hardship, only strengthened their resolve. They saw their survival as a sign of divine favor. They believed God was testing them, forging them into His chosen warriors. After years of marching, fighting, and enduring unimaginable suffering, the survivors, a fraction of the original force, finally saw their goal. In the early summer of 1099, the Crusaders stood before the mighty walls of Jerusalem. They were exhausted, malnourished, and demoralized. Their numbers had dwindled to perhaps 12,000 fighting men. Before them stood a city that had resisted sieges for centuries. Jerusalem was a fortress, protected by massive stone walls and defended by a well-supplied Fatimid garrison. The Crusaders, on the other hand, had almost nothing. They lacked proper siege equipment. There was little wood in the arid landscape to build any, and the wells outside the city had been poisoned. Their situation was beyond desperate. It was hopeless. They were a starving army camped in a hostile desert, trying to conquer an impregnable city. By all logic, they should have given up, turned back, or simply perished. But they didn't. Fueled by a desperate, fanatical faith, they prepared for one final all-or-nothing assault. They scavenged every piece of wood they could find, even dismantling ships that had arrived at a nearby port to construct two massive siege towers. Priests held processions around the city, praying for divine intervention. They fasted and prayed, convinced that their piety would bring them victory. On July 14, 1099, the assault began. The fighting was savage. The city's defenders fought back fiercely, showering the attackers with a storm of arrows, rocks, and Greek fire, a terrifying, flammable substance that couldn't be extinguished with water. One of the siege towers was burned and destroyed. For a full day, the battle raged, with the Crusaders being thrown back time and again. It seemed their last gamble had failed. Then, on July 15th, something shifted. According to the chronicles, a knight named Godfrey of Bouillon, one of the leaders of the Crusade, managed to get his siege tower close enough to the northern wall. After hours of brutal hand-to-hand combat, the Crusaders finally gained a foothold on the battlements. A breach was made, the gates were thrown open, and the Crusader army poured into the city. Against all odds, against all logic, the starving, exhausted army had done the impossible. They had captured Jerusalem. What happened next is one of the darkest chapters of the Crusades. The joy of victory quickly turned into a frenzy of violence. The Crusaders, who had endured so much and believed they were acting as agents of God's wrath, unleashed a brutal massacre upon the city's inhabitants. Chronicles from the time, written by the Crusaders themselves, describe scenes of horrific slaughter. They killed Muslims and Jews, men, women, and children indiscriminately. For the victors, this wasn't just conquest, it was a cleansing, a righteous act of reclaiming the holy city. After the bloodshed, the knights, their armor still stained with blood, made their way to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, the site believed to be Christ's tomb. There, they fell to their knees, weeping and praying, overcome with emotion. In their minds, they had fulfilled their holy vow. They had completed their pilgrimage. God's will had been done. The news of Jerusalem's fall sent shockwaves across the known world. In Europe, it was hailed as a miracle, a testament to the power of faith. It proved that with God's help, even the most impossible tasks could be achieved. The success of the First Crusade led to the establishment of 4 Crusader states in the Holy Land, creating a Christian foothold in the region that would last for nearly 200 years. The story of the First Crusade became the stuff of legend, a heroic epic of faith, sacrifice, and divine victory that would inspire generations to come. It was a defining moment that not only reshaped the political map of the Middle East, but also forever altered the relationship between Christianity and Islam. It was more than just a military campaign. It was a moment where the sheer force of human belief, channeled into a single, desperate goal, changed the course of history forever. Thank you so much for joining me on this incredible journey back in time. If you found this story as fascinating as I do, please hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the most dramatic moments in history. Let me know in the comments what you think. Was it a miracle or a result of sheer human will? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Until next time, stay curious.